Welcome to the Coach Barnabas podcast. It's time to take a few minutes and leave behind the stuff that drains us and recharge our batteries with some encouragement and insight. Finding the extraordinary in the ordinary.
Hi, welcome back to Coach Barnabas. It's great to have you. Looking forward to diving into this one. The last couple episodes, I've been speaking about leaps of faith, pretty significant, life-changing leaps of faith that I made in my life as an adult, independent of, it's not like you're a kid and your parents decide they're going to move to another state or another town and you're little and you go along. This is as an adult facing, some major life decisions that are not, sometimes you're forced into a position where you have to do something. You're kind of kicked out of the nest, okay, like being a kid. But even as an adult, if you lose your job or, the company folds or something like that, and you're forced to look for a new job, or if you're a renter and, you're renting a house and the landlord comes to you and says, I've sold the house and you have to move out. Sometimes we're kicked into situations that are not in our timing, not our choosing, and we have to make lifetime decisions. And then there are other times where it's like you just have this stirring inside of you. I don't know how else to describe it, where you feel like, a life change or a decision is coming your way. Or sometimes a circumstance will arise and you're faced with, as I kind of described in my last episode, when I met the woman who would become my wife, who lived 3,000 miles away from me, in order to pursue that relationship, which was one of a kind. I knew it immediately that this was a one of a kind relationship, that if it were to reach its potential and more, it was going to require me to make a radical decision and change in my life, of moving and uprooting my entire life from California and moving it to Rhode Island, which is what I did. But so there are circumstances, and there's an old quote from the most successful college basketball coach, and some might even say basketball coach at any level, or maybe even in any sport. That was John Wooden, who was the UCLA college basketball coach back in the 60s and 70s, maybe even back into the 50s, probably back into the 50s as well. I forget his exact resume, so forgive me. But he had a great quote, and he said, when an opportunity arises, it's too late to prepare, which is very true. So preparation, you may not even realize you're preparing for a major life change or major life decision, but a lot of little micro decisions add up, and they become kind of the foundation for larger decisions. And so along the way, when you're making these little decisions, they actually are setting a foundation for the bigger ones. And you have been, even if accidentally, even if unknowingly, you've been preparing for bigger decisions. And that was certainly the case in my life. But what I want to get into here today is to talk about, as I've described before, I'm a Christian. And so everything I do, within reason, I didn't really pray about what, hat and shirt I was going to wear today. But, when it comes to significant decisions or even some of the minor ones, you pray about it, you think about it, and you want to, make good decisions. You want it to be ordained and blessed and directed by God. So that raises a question of, how do you know when you're hearing from God? How, people say they hear from God. Do you hear an audible voice? Is there some sort of sign, whatever? And so I kind of want to dive into that a little bit. I don't claim to have all the answers because it's very unique. There's a million or maybe even countless different ways that God communicates to us. Okay. I want to share with you just some of my stories, some of the things that happened in my life. But I want to start by doing that is to give an illustration of something that did happen in my life. When I was 16 years old, I got my first after-school job working for a local florist. I was a delivery boy. And as it turned out, I had just gotten my driver's license, obviously, just shortly before that. And so I started working there, and one of the tasks, and among the things I did in delivering flower arrangements and whatever to people around town, some of my duties included making the boxes that flower arrangements went in, and there were the little flimsy boxes with tabs and slots, and they're already kind of laid out flat, but they had little creases in them where you fold them, and there'd be big long ones that were narrow but long that were for like long stem roses and things like that. And you have smaller boxes for boutonnieres and corsages and things like that. So among my duties was to fold these and prepare these for when they were needed, and I'd have a stack of them. So the staff downstairs could make their arrangements or whatever and put them in these pre-made boxes that I took care of. Now the place where I had to do this was upstairs in the building in a windowless attic. Okay, so one day I'm up there and I'm doing my thing, and all of a sudden I hear outside, because there was a little street that was just outside the store. I hear a car door close, and then I hear some keys jingling. And I instantly recognize them. That was my mom. Now, this is if you look at me and you imagine me at 16 years old, you could probably figure out this is before cell phones. This is before pagers or anything like that. Any kind of device that you carry on you that somebody could use and say, hey, I'm on my way to visit you. Okay. So I had no idea. But I recognized the car door and the jingle of her keys. And so instinctively, I stopped what I was doing, went down the stairs. And when I came up down the stairs, my coworkers looked at me like, is everything okay? I was like, yeah, my mom's coming in. And they kind of looked at each other. And then sure enough, within seconds, my mom comes waltzing in through the front door. And they looked at each other and they looked back at me like, how in the world did you know? And I use that as an illustration to say, it came from just familiarity, from relationship. I had heard that car door and I'd heard those keys so many times that they were distinctive to me. There was a uniqueness that I can't quantify. I can't tell you what differentiates my mom's car door from any other car door, or the combination of keys and keychain that were on hers, a number of keys she had, whatever. I knew that was her car, and I knew that was her keys. And there were always, I don't know how many cars had come and gone in the time I was up there and all the times I was up there. But this particular time, I recognized it and I responded. So that to me has served as a very good illustration of just how I know I'm hearing from God. Is it just comes from being familiar, from having intimacy, from having a close personal relationship with Him, as I did with my mom. There was a familiarity. There was something I heard every day, and completely instinctively, I just knew, I recognized it when I heard it. And so now, when I first became a Christian, I was 18 years old, and I didn't know anything. Okay, so I didn't have, a long-standing personal relationship with God like I did my mom when I was 16 years old. At 18 years old, I didn't have this long-standing relationship with God, but there were ways that He spoke to me in ways I didn't know He was speaking to me. And I look back at it and go, that was Him speaking to me. For instance, I'm in high school, and during my senior year of high school, I was the band president. I played the trombone, and I was the music department president. And every year we took an annual trip to Southern California. If you've been paying attention, if you've been watching in the past, I'm from Northern California. So every year we took a trip to Southern California, and we would participate in different competitions. We would go to Disneyland and do all kinds of fun things. And we always stayed at a hotel along the beach. Outside of Anaheim. And to be, honest, without going into detail, here's 100 or so teenagers, high school kids, and we had, 10 chaperones, handful chaperones. So we, the child to chaperone ratio was way out of whack. Okay. And at nights, here's a bunch of high school kids in a hotel staying, directly across the street from a beach. And we got into all kinds of trouble. We did all sorts of things that, we shouldn't have been doing. So, my freshman, sophomore, and junior years, it was the annual trip. This is what we did. And, we just created all kinds of trouble. Yeah. And then you always think like, man, our senior year is going to be the big blowout. We're just going to have so much fun and, do all this kind of stuff. Well, I became a Christian. It was April of 20. I'm sorry, 20. I hate to admit this. It was April of 1983. Okay, so if you're a mathematician, you can figure out a lot of things from that. But it was 1983, and within that span of time was this going to be this trip, because this trip was always like a spring break type of thing. So it was right about that exact same time. So to say I was a Christian for about 10 minutes is probably pretty close to literally accurate. But as the time was leading up to go on this trip, I don't even know if I was yet a Christian, to be honest with you. But I just lost my desire to go on this trip. It just drained from me. I had no interest in going. We had done all kinds of fundraisers and everything else. But as the trip was drawing closer, I went to the music director. And again, I was the president of the music department. So I'm a leader. I'm like the student leader. And I approached him and I said, I'm not going to go on the trip this year. And he looked at me like I had three heads. He was completely disappointed in me. And he let it show. He let it be known in no uncertain terms that he was disappointed in me. But I said that my mind was made up. I wasn't going. And so fast forward to the opposite side of the trip. Okay, it's the first day back to school after the trip is come and gone. And I'm walking through the halls, and we had the dean of students, who I had a good relationship with through my 3+ years at the school. And he came up to me in the halls on my way to class, and he just told me how disappointed he was in me. And I thought maybe he was disappointed I didn't go on the trip. I was like, sorry, what did I do? And he told me he heard about the activities that happened on this particular trip. And so to this day, I don't know what happened. It was never explained to me, but, I had been on previous trips and never heard from the dean of students. But this time in particular, he approached me. And so apparently things happened on this trip that even, made the other stuff look mellow. I don't know. And I told him I didn't even go. And he looked at me like, oh, okay then. Wow. All right. He was kind of shocked by that. But it restored my reputation with him, because whatever happened down there wasn't on me, wasn't on my watch. I didn't participate in it. I was 400 miles north. So I look back on that later and realized that was God kind of protecting me. Number one, he protected my relationship or my reputation by not being there, and I could be completely detached from it and not included in, among those who were alleged to have behaved poorly on that particular trip. But he also protected me from temptation. Had I been there and still really wobbly in the knees like a newborn deer, as a Christian, just super, who knows? I might have been tempted into doing things I shouldn't have been doing. So again, there's from one extreme to another, from having a long-standing relationship with him to just instinctively recognizing his voice, however you would quantify that, to just being brand new or just sensitive to him, and him just adding or removing desires from your life. You long for things you never thought you'd want, and you lose interest in things that you've always wanted. That's kind of how it worked for me, because in a way I was being prepared for this decision in my life that would now, it's 41 years later. I'll just let the cat out of the bag. 41 years later, I'm still living true to that commitment I made at 18 years old back in April of 1983. So, that's where just a couple of examples of how you're hearing from God. Now, let me go back to the previous episode when I talk about my transition from California to New England. In praying about this and thinking about it, it's like, I'm praying, God, close doors where they shouldn't be open, and open doors where maybe they've been closed. Open the ones you want me to go through and close the ones you want me to stay away from. If this isn't your desire, do something radical, because my heart is invested in this, obviously in pursuing my relationship with Sarah. And so I felt stronger and stronger about the desire to go, but still subject to God, just whatever you want. Spare me my own personal heartache or inflicting heartache on somebody else by making a decision that's going to be absolutely wrong and blow up in all our faces. And all along the way, I just really felt like the doors were opening and things were happening for me, and I did it. And if you remember, I talked about it was really a short period of time that I wouldn't recommend for anybody, because on paper it makes zero sense. Because I first met her online in August of 2013, and by March of 2014, 6-7 months later, I'm packing everything I own into my vehicle and heading east, 3,000 miles to Rhode Island. And so now I'm in Rhode Island. And I've made arrangements through a friend of Sarah's who was a missionary to the Philippines. And so they had a home here in Rhode Island, but they were in the Philippines. And so they said very generously that I could stay in their home for 1 month until they came back from the Philippines, because they were going to come back and be here for a while. And they said, but before we're back, you're going to be there in March. We're going to be arriving back. I forget exactly the date, but somewhere around April, whatever it was, end of April, something like that. So they gave me kind of a deadline, and but the place is yours. So I did that. Now, the time came where I had to move from their place, and I hadn't yet found a place of my own. And so in having, I briefly mentioned my pastor friend, who at the time, I can't even say he was my friend at that point. We'd known each other a little bit. We'd had a lot of conversations, but our relationship was still super brand new. But a very kind-hearted man, very loving, very wise. And so he and I had a conversation. I explained to him my situation. I got to find a place like pronto, because things have not been flowing the way I thought they would. And so here I am now. This time is expiring, and I've got to find a place to live. And he says, look, as it would turn out, I have a spare room, because he had a son who had just, ironically, moved from their house to San Francisco. So it was like an exchange program. I moved from the San Francisco Bay Area to Rhode Island, and he had a son who moved from up, his upstairs to San Francisco. So it was kind of funny how that worked out. But he says, you can stay there as long as you need. And I was just floored. I was like, wow, that's amazing. So now let me backtrack a number of years. I also mentioned in a previous episode that I used to live in San Jose, California. Now, when I was transitioning to San Jose, I wasn't born there. I knew a few people there, but I wasn't born there. I didn't have a lot of relationships, but I decided I was going to go there and get involved in music, in ministry at a very great church there. And as I was beginning to go there, I was developing some little relationships. And there was a gentleman there who knew now my transition was kind of sporadic. Found a church first, then I had a job, but I didn't yet have a place to live, and I was living about an hour away. So I had 2/3 of the tripod. I had a church, and I had a job, but no place to live yet. So this one gentleman in the church, he was in the choir with me, so we'd gotten to know each other a little bit that way. He approached me and said, hey, you know what? I have a mother-in-law unit behind my house, and you're welcome to stay there during the week. So your commute isn't an hour each way, and probably longer than that in California traffic during commute times. But he said, you're welcome to stay there during the week and as you need it until you find a place of your own. So I was like, wow, that's super generous. So I took him up on it, and I did that. So now fast forward back to Rhode Island. And some very kind people making a very similar offer. It's like, hey, we have this room upstairs. You can stay there as long as you need to. So now I'm at their house, and I'm flipping through my phone and through Facebook, of all things. And I see that my friend back in San Jose, the one who invited me to stay in the mother-in-law unit, he was in Boston with his family. And I was like, dude, you're like an hour from me. What are you doing? So, we're in the area because we're here for a family reunion. I was like, oh, that's terrific. It'd be so cool if we could meet up at some point. He's like, yeah. He says, well, our schedule's a little tight, but it'd be great if we could somehow make it happen. So kind of left it at that, and then I realized that the home I was staying in, they were going to be hosting a family reunion this coming weekend. And so now my interest is really peaked, and I go back and look at my friend's Facebook page, and I realize, because you can see like who your friends are friends, and if you have mutual friends. So I looked through mutual friends, and sure enough, my friend from San Jose and the people's home I'm staying in are connected on Facebook. Now remember, California, in a teeny tiny little town in Rhode Island. Now Rhode Island's a teeny tiniest state, and now you got a teeny tiny little town inside the teeny tiniest little state. But somehow they know each other, and I'm like, what in the world? So I mentioned, how do you know these people? Wait for this. Okay, it turns out that my friend from California, and now my pastor and friend in Rhode Island, their mothers were sisters. Yep. They were first cousins. And they both kind of bookended this major chapter of faith in my life, moving to San Jose and establishing a new life there that I loved, to moving to Rhode Island, okay, and starting a life here. And it's first cousins. Their moms were sisters. And it blew my mind, but it was one of those things where I sat there, and to me, that was absolute confirmation that God was revealing his hand in all of this. From that step in San Jose, which was like 1997, right around there, 98, to now 2014 and 3,000 miles away, that God revealed to himself, he's been with me every step of the way, and he was letting me know that I'm where he wants me to be. And some people might, the cynics among us might say, it's coincidence. You can't. There's no way. You cannot convince me that's coincidence. It's just impossible. I'm sorry. But it's just sometimes God just reveals himself after you've already taken the step of faith. Okay? And just to kind of remind you and encourage you that you're hearing me. You are in fact hearing me. Trust me, I'm here. And there may be things that'll be revealed to me 10, 15 years down the road of something else. I have no idea. I didn't ask for that. But that was just his way of just throwing me a little something, saying, you're doing the right thing. You're following me in this. I'm in this, and I'm with you. And what I didn't know at the time, even then, after God kind of revealing himself, like, ta-da, I'm here. This is us. That things were going to get really rocky, really difficult. But I could lean on the fact that the assurance that he gave me, that he was with me, he was by my side, he was directing me, he was guiding me, and that I was on the right path. And no matter what came my way, I had that assurance. And that it wasn't just me. I wasn't doing this on my own. I wasn't left to my own devices. There were certain things I had to do. There was a certain human response involved in all of this, right? But if I just simply continued on the course and trusted him as I had been, praying as I had been, seeking him as I had been, dedicating it to him as I had been, then things would work out in their due time. And he would reveal himself as being part of it all along the way and just give me that assurance. So I just wanted to share that with you and say, you know what? The voice of God comes across in different ways. Some people claim they hear an audible voice. I've never had that, and that's okay. But he has revealed himself in just as equally tangible and obvious way as an audible voice, in ways that have encouraged my faith, in ways that have challenged me. And there are times when he's silent. And all you have is his word, okay? So that's, an important factor is reading the Bible, okay? That's a big thing. And there were times where he just remained silent, and he is essentially testing our relationship with him and to stay within the guidelines, to stay within the parameters he set for us. And in due time, he will speak to us again. And even then, in subtle ways, I think even in his silence, he's speaking to us. We just have to stop, be still and know that he is God. That's Psalm 46:10. Just be still, be silent, be calm, and trust that he's God and that he will lead us and guide us. Even though we walk through the shadow of death, right? He's with us every step of the way. So that's my word of encouragement to you today. And I trust that, this hopefully encourages you in some way. If you're facing a major decision in your life, if you feel unsettled, like some change is coming, to just follow those steps and just trust God, develop a personal relationship, develop an intimacy with him to where you recognize his voice and react instinctively like I did with the car door and the keys, and just develop that and get to know him, and you will know his voice. You'll know when he's leading you and directing you. So I just want you to be encouraged, be an encouragement, and we'll catch you next time. Take care.
Thank you for joining the Coach Barnabas podcast. We'd greatly appreciate your support by liking and subscribing to the podcast and setting up notifications so we can let you know when new episodes are available. We'd love to hear from you, so please leave a comment. Make a difference today.